I heard it again last night. That sound, a radio crackling with static somewhere in the fog. The kind of noise that makes your skin crawl because you know nothing good follows. It's been 3 days since I arrived in Silent Hill, a place that exists somewhere between reality and nightmare. I came here because of a letter from my wife, Mary, the same wife I watched die of that terrible illness 3 years ago. Yet somehow, she wrote to me, telling me she was waiting in our special place in Silent Hill. The drive here was long and lonely, my thoughts darker than the stretches of empty road ahead. I stopped at a grimy restroom off the highway, staring at my reflection, hollow eyes, unwashed hair, the face of a man running towards something as much as he's running away. When I finally reached the observation deck overlooking Toluca Lake, everything seemed normal, peaceful even, just an ordinary tourist town shrouded in mist. Little did I know what waited beneath that innocuous fog. My apartment back in Ashfield feels a lifetime away now. A small, cluttered one-bedroom with Mary's clothes still hanging in the closet, her perfume bottles collecting dust on the dresser. I couldn't bring myself to throw anything away. Sometimes I'd wake in the night thinking I could smell her scent, hear her breathing beside me, but it was always just the neighbor's television through the thin walls, or the radiator kicking on. The night before I left, I swear I heard her voice calling from the bathroom. When I checked, there was only my own reflection in the mirror, ghostly pale in the fluorescent light, but the shower curtain had been moved just slightly, as if someone had recently stepped out. My first steps into Silent Hill were met with an unnatural silence. The fog here doesn't just limit visibility, it seems to swallow sound itself. My footsteps on the pavement were muffled, distant, as if I was hearing them through water. I called out Mary's name, and my voice fell flat, going nowhere. That's when I noticed something odd. There were no birds, no distant traffic sounds, not even wind through the trees, just emptiness. And that subtle, persistent radio static growing louder as I walked deeper into town. The first time I saw one of them, I thought it was just a person walking strangely through the mist, a hunched figure shuffling along the street ahead of me. I called out, asking if they needed help. When it turned, I realized no human moves that way. Joints bending at impossible angles, flesh that didn't look quite solid. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. My radio suddenly erupted with screeching static, nearly deafening me. By the time I looked up again, the figure was lurching toward me with unnatural speed. I ran. What else could I do? I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out, ducking into an abandoned apartment building and barricading the door behind me. That first night in Silent Hill, I huddled in a corner of apartment 302, jumping at every creak and groan of the building settling. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing messages scratched into the plaster beneath. Words I couldn't bring myself to read too closely. A child's drawing was pinned to the refrigerator, depicting stick figures surrounded by red crayon scribbles. The longer I stared at it, the more I could swear the figures were moving, their limbs stretching toward the edges of the paper. I blinked, and it was just a drawing again. Sleep came in fitful bursts, haunted by dreams of hospital corridors, and a man in a strange pyramid-shaped helmet dragging an enormous blade. Morning brought no relief. The same impenetrable fog waited outside, the same unnatural silence. I found a map in a tourist information stand and tried to orient myself. According to the letter, Mary was waiting at our special place, but we had many special places in Silent Hill. The hotel where we spent our last vacation together, the park where I proposed. As I studied the map, I noticed something strange. Streets that I didn't remember, buildings in places they shouldn't be. It was as if the town itself was changing, reshaping to some twisted design. When I looked up from the map, I saw a woman in the distance, red cardigan, dark hair. For a moment, my heart stopped. "Mary?" I called out, my voice breaking. The figure turned slightly, just enough for me to see it wasn't her. This woman was younger, her face similar but different. She disappeared around a corner before I could reach her. The hospital loomed out of the fog unexpectedly, its facade grimy and neglected. I hadn't planned to go there. The memories of Mary's illness were still too painful, but something drew me inside. The reception area was abandoned, paperwork scattered across the floor, as if everyone had left in a hurry. The air smelled of antiseptic and something else, something metallic and organic that made my stomach turn. My radio began to crackle as I ventured deeper, the static rising and falling like labored breathing. In one of the examination rooms, I found a diary page written in Mary's handwriting, describing her deteriorating condition and her growing resentment toward me. The words were cruel, bitter, nothing like the Mary I remembered. "You're not the one who's suffering," she had written. "Watching you stand there and do nothing, that's what hurts the most." I encountered the woman in the red cardigan again in the hospital cafeteria. She introduced herself as Maria and seemed surprised I didn't recognize her. There was something unsettling about how familiar she was with me, how she tilted her head the same way Mary used to when she was confused. "I'm not your Mary," she said with a sad smile, "but I can be, if you want me to be." Before I could respond, we heard something massive dragging across the floor in the corridor outside, a sound like metal scraping concrete. Maria's eyes widened with genuine terror. "He's coming," she whispered. "We need to hide. Now." We hid in a supply closet, pressed together in the darkness as the thing in the corridor moved past our door. Through a crack, I caught a glimpse of it. A towering figure with a rust-colored, pyramid-shaped helmet, dragging a blade bigger than a man. My mind rejected what my eyes were seeing, but the primal fear in my gut didn't care about logic or possibility. This was death, walking the halls, searching. But searching for what? For whom? Maria clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't let him find me," she pleaded. "He wants to punish me, to punish us." When I asked her what she meant, she looked at me with Mary's eyes and said, "You know exactly what we did." After the creature moved on, Maria and I separated. She said she needed to check something in another wing of the hospital, promising to meet me later at Rosewater Park. Alone again, I found myself drawn to the psychiatric ward on the 3rd floor. The doors to most of the rooms were locked, but patient files were strewn everywhere. One caught my eye, a case study of a man who had mercy killed his terminally ill wife, then repressed the memory, convincing himself she had died naturally of her disease. The psychiatrist noted that the patient had created an elaborate fantasy where his wife was still alive somewhere, waiting for him, reading those clinical, detached notes about someone so similar to me sent a chill through my body. I told myself it was just a coincidence. The psychiatric ward bathroom was where I found it. A videotape simply labeled Mary. My hands trembled as I searched for something to play it on, eventually finding an old TV and VCR in the staff break room. The screen showed a hospital room, Mary in bed, her face gaunt, hair brittle and falling out. I was sitting beside her, holding her hand. We were arguing. She was shouting that I couldn't possibly understand her pain, that I was waiting for her to die so I could move on. The camera caught my expression, not grief or patience, but disgust and resentment, then static, and when the picture returned, my hands were on a pillow, pressing down over Mary's face. Her arms flailed, weaker and weaker, until they went still. The tape ended with me staring directly into the camera, tears streaming down my face, whispering, "I'm sorry." I ejected the tape, telling myself it was a fake, a sick joke someone was playing on me. But deep down, in a place I'd kept locked away for 3 years, I knew. Memories started flooding back. Not the sanitized version I'd been telling myself, but the ugly truth. Mary's illness had gone on for so long, turning her from the vibrant woman I loved into a bitter, resentful stranger who hated me for still being healthy. I'd visited her less and less frequently, making excuses, unable to bear her accusations. And then, one day, I'd ended her suffering, not out of mercy, but exhaustion. I couldn't remember driving home that day, or burying those memories so deep that I constructed an entirely different reality, where she had died peacefully, with dignity. The realization sent me stumbling out of the hospital and into the fog-choked streets. My radio screamed with static as shapes moved through the mist. Around me, creatures dragging themselves along the ground. Things that looked like mannequins, with limbs at impossible angles. Were they real, or manifestations of my guilt? It didn't matter anymore. I ran toward Rosewater Park, toward the promise of seeing Maria again. My mind already transforming her into a second chance, a version of Mary who wasn't sick, who didn't hate me. The park was deserted when I arrived, the lake beyond it invisible through the thick fog. I called out for Maria, my voice echoing unanswered across the empty space. At the railing overlooking the water stood a solitary figure, a woman in a floral dress, her back to me. My heart leapt into my throat. Mary? I approached slowly, afraid that if I moved too quickly, she might disappear. She turned, and for a moment, I saw my wife as she was, before the illness, beautiful, serene, loving. Then her image flickered, like a television with poor reception. Her face decayed before my eyes, skin sloughing off to reveal the ravages of her disease. "You killed me," she said, her voice distorting. "And then you forgot about me." I reached out to her, but my hand passed through her form as if she were made of the same fog that surrounded us. "I never forgot," I insisted. tears streaming down my face. "I came here because of your letter. You said you were waiting." Mary's apparition laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "I never wrote a letter, James. Dead people don't write letters. You wrote it to yourself because you couldn't face what you did." As she spoke, I noticed the pyramid-headed executioner standing at the far end of the park, watching us, his massive blade resting on the ground beside him. Understanding dawned on me. He wasn't hunting Maria or Mary. He was hunting me. Mary's form began to dissipate into the mist. "Find me in the hotel, James," she whispered as she faded. "Find me where you took me for our last vacation, where we were happy before everything went wrong. That's where this needs to end." With those words, she was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of my crime and the knowledge that every horror in this town was a reflection of my own guilt. The creatures, the shifting reality, the executioner with his relentless pursuit. All of it was Silent Hill's judgment, my judgment. As I turned to leave the park, I saw Maria waiting by the entrance, smiling as if nothing strange had happened. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said brightly. "I thought we could go to the hotel together. I've never been, but you could show me around." Looking at her, this woman with Mary's face, but none of her illness, none of her suffering, I understood what she represented. She was what I had wanted. Mary without the disease, without the accusations, without the crushing responsibility. A fantasy I could love without guilt. "I'd like that," I told her. Knowing it was a lie, we set off together through the nightmare town toward the Lakeview Hotel, where I would finally face the truth I'd been running from for 3 years. The fog closed in around us, and my radio began to emit that familiar static, warning me that we weren't alone in the mist. But this time, I didn't run. Whatever was coming for us, for me, I deserved it. And somewhere in the labyrinth of Silent Hill streets, I could hear the steady scrape of a massive blade being dragged across pavement, following us, following me. The journey through Silent Hill's twisted streets felt both endless and too brief. Maria walked beside me, occasionally pointing out landmarks as if we were normal tourists in a normal town. I played along, nodding at her observations while scanning the fog for movement. The static from my radio would rise and fall, sometimes screaming in warning, other times falling silent so completely that I found myself checking if it still worked. During one of these quiet moments, Maria took my hand, her touch unnervingly similar to Mary's. "What was she like?" she asked suddenly. "Your wife. The real Mary." The question caught me off guard. I started to give the polite answer that Mary was kind, beautiful, perfect. But something about this place made lies difficult to maintain. She was complicated, I admitted. Strong-willed, could hold a grudge longer than anyone I've ever known. But she had this laugh that made you feel like you were the funniest person alive. And she loved thunderstorms. She'd sit by the window for hours, watching lightning. Maria listened intently, her expression unreadable. "She sounds real," she finally said. "Not like me." Before I could respond, my radio erupted with static, and something pale and twisted emerged from an alleyway ahead. We ran, ducking into the nearest building, a bowling alley, its lanes stretching into darkness. Inside, we found a young girl hiding among the arcade machines. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. Her face smudged with dirt, eyes wary beyond her years. She introduced herself as Laura and claimed to know Mary, said they were friends in the hospital. When I explained that wasn't possible, that Mary had been dead for 3 years, Laura looked at me with such contempt it was startling. "Liar," she spat. "I got a letter from Mary last week. She said she was waiting here, but she was worried her husband might not come." Before I could question her further, she darted away, disappearing through a back exit. Maria suggested we follow her. The girl clearly knew something we didn't. But as we moved toward the exit, the lights flickered and went out completely. In the pitch blackness, I felt Maria's hand slip from mine. I called her name, fumbling for my flashlight. When I finally got it working, sweeping the beam across the bowling alley, Maria was gone. In her place stood the pyramid-headed executioner, his massive blade raised. I ran, crashing through the exit door and into the street, not looking back. The static on my radio reached a fever pitch before abruptly cutting out, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. Alone again, I followed my map toward the hotel. The streets had changed, some blocked by bottomless chasms, others transformed into twisted metal, grating suspended over darkness. The town itself seemed to be deteriorating, breaking down into something more abstract and nightmarish. With each passing hour, I found myself wading through water that hadn't been there before, the buildings around me warping and rusting, as if centuries were passing in minutes. Silent Hill was shedding its pretense of normalcy, revealing what it truly was, a manifestation of my own fractured psyche. I found Maria again outside the hotel, or rather, her body, displayed like a grotesque exhibition. The pyramid-headed executioner stood over her, his blade dripping. I should have been horrified, but all I felt was a dull acceptance. She wasn't real. None of this was real in the conventional sense. She was a creation of this place, of my desires, just as the executioner was a creation of my guilt. As I watched, unable to move, he turned his helmet toward me in acknowledgement before dragging his blade away into the fog. A message, a promise, "You're next." The Lakeview Hotel stood on the shores of Toluca Lake, once grand, but now decrepit. Its elegance long faded. The doors swung open at my touch, welcoming me into a lobby frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, a sign-in book open to the page where Mary and I had registered 3 years ago. Our room key was waiting on the counter, room 312, as if the staff had been expecting me. As I climbed the stairs, the hotel began to transform around me. Wallpaper peeled away to reveal damp, pulsating flesh beneath. Carpets became sticky and organic. The paintings on the walls shifted, the scenic landscapes morphing into disturbing tableaus of suffering. Room 312 was exactly as we had left it. Bed neatly made, Mary's hairbrush on the vanity, our suitcases stacked in the corner. On the bed lay a videotape, identical to the one I'd found in the hospital. This time, I didn't hesitate to play it. The television in our room flickered to life, showing the same footage. Mary in her hospital bed, our argument, my hands on the pillow. But this time, the video continued. It showed me after, sitting beside her body, weeping uncontrollably begging forgiveness from someone who could no longer hear me. It showed me carefully arranging her body to look peaceful, as if she had simply passed in her sleep. It showed me constructing the lie I would tell myself for years to come. When the video ended, Mary was sitting on the bed beside me, not the healthy Mary, nor the decaying apparition from the park, but Mary as she was in her final days. Gaunt, tired, but present, real. "I've been waiting for you to remember," she said softly, "to take responsibility." I reached for her hand, and this time I could feel it, cold but solid. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words wholly inadequate for what I had done. Mary's expression remained neutral, neither forgiving nor condemning. "Sorry doesn't undo death, James, but it's a start." She stood, moving to the window overlooking the lake, her hospital gown billowing slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel. "Silent Hill called to you because you needed it to. You needed to face what you did, what you became." I joined her at the window, seeing not the fog-covered lake, but a perfect reflection of our hotel room. Except in the reflection, Mary's body still lay on the bed, and I stood over it, pillow in hand, frozen in the moment of my crime. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hardly more than a whisper. Mary turned to me, her eyes filled with a complex emotion I couldn't name. "That depends on you, James. Silent Hill offers many paths out of the fog: redemption, punishment, delusion, acceptance. The choice has always been yours." As she spoke, I noticed movement at the door to our room. The pyramid-headed executioner stood watching, his massive blade resting at his side. For the first time, I didn't feel fear at his presence. I understood now. He was never going to kill me. He was waiting for my decision. I looked back at Mary, really seeing her for perhaps I heard it again last night. That soft whisper in my ear just as I was about to fall asleep. "Just one more bet," it said. "This time, you'll win everything back." I shot up in bed, heart pounding, sweat beading on my forehead, despite the cool air from the open window. My empty apartment was silent, except for the distant sounds of traffic and the rhythmic ticking of the clock on my nightstand. 3:17 a.m. Nobody was there, of course. Nobody had been there for weeks. Not since Sarah had taken the kids and left, but I could have sworn the voice was real. So close I could feel the breath on my ear. So familiar, yet not quite human. I used to be normal, I think. That's the strange part of addiction. You can't pinpoint exactly when the line was crossed. 3 years ago, I was David Mercer, respected financial advisor with a beautiful family, a comfortable suburban home, and a retirement account that made my colleagues envious. Gambling was just an occasional diversion during business trips to Vegas. A few hands of blackjack, maybe some roulette if I was feeling adventurous. I was always careful, setting strict limits, until I wasn't. Something changed after that big win, $8,000 on a single hand. The rush was indescribable, better than any drug I'd tried in college. The casino lights seemed brighter that night, the air sweeter. I remember the weight of those chips in my palm, the satisfying click as I stacked them. Success felt tangible, deserved. My apartment now is a far cry from the home I once had. It's a one-bedroom in a rundown building downtown, the kind of place where the neighbors never make eye contact in the hallway, and mysterious stains decorate the carpet. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbor's television through them, though lately it's been strangely quiet. The furniture is sparse, just a mattress on the floor, a folding table with a single chair, and my laptop. The laptop is essential. It's my portal to the online casinos that have consumed my life. Even now, with my bank account overdrawn and collection agencies calling daily, I feel the familiar itch in my fingertips urging me to log in. Just one more bet. Maybe this time. The first sign that something was wrong, truly wrong beyond the obvious financial strain, came about 2 months ago. I'd been on a terrible losing streak, hemorrhaging money I didn't have through online poker sites and sports betting apps. I'd maxed out my credit cards, taken loans from people I shouldn't have. That night, I fell into an exhausted sleep after 36 hours awake, chasing increasingly desperate bets. In my dreams, I stood at a roulette table. Unlike any I'd seen before, the wheel was massive, seemingly stretching into infinity, and instead of numbers, each pocket contained scenes from my life: my wedding day, the birth of my children, the funeral of my father. A skeletal croupier with eyes like burning coals gestured for me to place my bet. When I awoke, my laptop was open beside me, though I was certain I'd closed it. On the screen was a poker site I'd never visited before. My account somehow already created. Deposit already made. The transaction record showed it had happened at 3:17 a.m. while I was asleep. I told myself it was just stress-induced sleepwalking, that I must have signed up in a daze and forgotten. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. Something had changed in my apartment after that night. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Objects weren't where I left them. My lucky poker chip, a souvenir from that first big win, would appear in strange places. Inside the refrigerator, balanced on the shower head, once even in my mouth, when I woke up choking in the middle of the night. I started sleeping with the lights on, though the bulbs seemed to burn dimmer each night. No matter how many times I replaced them, Sarah noticed the changes in me long before I admitted there was a problem. "Your eyes look different," she said one morning over breakfast, studying me with concern. "Like someone else is looking out through them." I laughed it off, but later that day, caught my reflection in a store window. For a split second, my face seemed distorted, my smile too wide, my eyes black and bottomless, like a shark's. I blinked, and my normal reflection returned, but the image stayed with me. That was the day I promised Sarah I would stop gambling. I deleted the apps from my phone, installed blocking software on my computer, even called the casinos to ban myself from entry. I was determined to beat whatever this was. It worked for almost 2 weeks. The withdrawal was brutal. Insomnia, irritability, panic attacks when I thought about the money I'd lost and would never have a chance to win back. But I was doing it. Sarah was proud of me. I started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, opened up about the depth of my financial troubles. We would need to sell the house, liquidate our savings, but we could rebuild. Then came the night of our anniversary. Sarah had gone to bed early, and I was up watching TV when an online gambling commercial played. Something about the dealer's eyes in the ad caught my attention. They seemed to look directly at me, to recognize me. As the commercial ended, I could have sworn he whispered my name. Without conscious thought, I found myself at my computer, the blocking software mysteriously uninstalled, logging into a new betting site. By morning, I had lost $17,000 I didn't have, emptying our joint account, including the mortgage payment. When confronted with what I'd done, I couldn't explain it. It was like something was controlling me. I told Sarah, immediately regretting how insane it sounded. She didn't say much as she packed, just that she and the kids would be staying with her sister until I got professional help. That was 23 days ago. I check my phone 100 times daily for messages from her, but there's been nothing since a brief text last week. The kids are asking about you. Please get help. I've tried reaching out to explain, but how could I tell her the truth? That sometimes my hands move on their own to place bets. That I hear whispers guiding my gambling choices. That I sometimes wake up to find myself already online, making bets I have no memory of placing. Last Tuesday, after 3 days without sleep, I decided I needed evidence. I set up my phone to record myself while I slept, propping it on the dresser, with a clear view of my bed and the desk where my laptop sat. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, my blood ran cold. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I sat up in bed, eyes open but vacant. My movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette being controlled by inexperienced hands. I walked to the computer and began gambling online. As I watched myself on the screen, I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. A shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light. It seemed to be directing my movements with subtle gestures of long, spindly fingers. When I turned to look at that corner in the present moment, I saw nothing, but the air felt colder, somehow, expectant. The footage should have terrified me enough to run from this apartment and never return. Instead, it awakened something else, a desperate curiosity. If something or someone was controlling my gambling, perhaps it could be convinced to help me win. The thought came unbidden, shameful in its naked greed, but I couldn't shake it. That night, I spoke aloud to the empty room. If you're going to use me to gamble, at least help me win. The silence that followed was deafening, but as I drifted off to sleep, I could have sworn I heard soft laughter from the darkest corner of the room. The next day, I won. Every bet, every hand, every spin went my way. By midnight, I had recouped a significant portion of my losses, enough to make a payment to the most dangerous of my creditors, perhaps even enough to start winning Sarah back. I was elated, convinced I had struck some sort of bargain with whatever entity shared my apartment. I celebrated with expensive whiskey delivered from the liquor store down the street. As I drank alone, I raised my glass to the shadow in the corner. To profitable partnerships, I slurred. Just before passing out, I thought I saw the shadow move closer, hovering over me like a concerned parent, or a predator assessing its prey. The winds continued for days. I was invincible, untouchable. The whispers became more frequent, more conversational, offering specific advice on bets. The horse in lane 5 will falter. Bet against it. The dealer has 19. Double down. Always right. always leading to more money. I started sleeping better, eating regularly for the first time in months. I called Sarah with good news. I was getting help, not a complete lie, though my help wasn't exactly therapeutic, and I would soon be able to repay what I had taken from our account. She sounded cautiously optimistic, agreed to bring the kids for a supervised visit the following weekend. Everything was looking up. I should have known it wouldn't last. Last night, my lucky streak shattered. Every bet went wrong. Every sure thing failed. I lost everything I had won, and more, much more. In desperation, I took out new loans at catastrophic interest rates, certain my partner would help me win it back. But the shadow in the corner just watched as I spiraled, the whispers now tinged with amusement rather than encouragement. By dawn, I was ruined more completely than ever before. As the reality of my situation crashed over me, I screamed at the empty room. Why? Why would you do this to me? The answer came not as a whisper, but as words that appeared on my laptop screen, though I hadn't touched the keyboard. Because your despair is sweeter than your gratitude. First time since before her illness. Not as the perfect wife of my memories, nor as the burden I had resented, but as she truly was, a woman who had suffered, who had loved me, who had deserved better than what I gave her. I don't want to forget again, I told her. Whatever happens, I want to remember the truth. Mary smiled sadly, reaching up to touch my face. Her fingers were cold against my skin. Then you've already chosen your path. The walls of the hotel began to crack and peel, water pouring in through widening fissures. The floor beneath us trembled and started to give way. Through the disintegrating ceiling, I could see not the floors above, but an impossible sky, roiling with storm clouds and unnatural light. Silent Hill was collapsing around us, or perhaps it was releasing us. Mary's form began to fade, becoming translucent, part of the mist that was now filling our room. "Goodbye, James," she whispered, her voice everywhere and nowhere. "Remember me. Remember us as we were, not just how we ended." As the hotel crumbled into Toluca Lake, as Mary's spirit finally found release, as the pyramid-headed executioner lowered his blade in acknowledgement of my acceptance, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. Not happiness, not forgiveness. Those might come later, if at all. But the quiet calm that comes with facing one's darkest truth and surviving it. The fog of Silent Hill began to lift, revealing a path leading away from the town, back to the world I had left behind. Whatever waited for me there, judgment, isolation, the long road of atonement, I would face it carrying the weight of what I had done, but no longer crushed beneath the heavier burden of denial. I took one last look at the lake, at the ruins of the Lakeview Hotel disappearing beneath its surface, at the town of Silent Hill returning to stillness. Then I turned and began walking toward whatever came next. The radio in my pocket finally, mercifully silent,